First question. Sir, you're supposed to be at the microphone, but I'm going to hand you. Those mics are right here.
Okay, my question is, regardless of the outcome of the election, what are the chances that Obamacare will be repealed?
Okay, so there's a huge challenge with repealing Obamacare, and here's the main challenge. Within the healthcare law, there's lots of mandates. So you guys are familiar with the individual mandate to buy health insurance or pay the penalty. But the carriers had so many things they had to do. As examples, Blue Cross Blue Shield of Alabama spent $10 million in computer modifications to be compliant. Cigna Healthcare spent tens of millions of dollars, and we're not talking about benefit compliance. We're talking about hop on your left leg 3 times. A benefit statement's going to be 4 pages, printed front and back, with this size font, this size spacing, in this manner. Millions upon billions of dollars have been spent by states, by insurance companies, by everybody. The repeal of this will not be simple. It will have to be repealed in the same way that it was passed. It was passed with 70% of America saying, don't pass it, and they said, screw you, we're going to pass it. This will be the summer of 2013. The Democrats will be saying we're on the premises of all that's good and great about the healthcare law. Wait. It will take people with huge courage, and it will take us to speak up to give the courage. It can be done. It's up to you. It's up to me. It's up to your friends to make it happen.
I'd like to say, from a constitutional perspective, we heard a lot about this during the presidential debates. The president does not have the power to do anything with Obamacare. With the Health Care Act. I'm not supposed to say that. The Health Care Act. The President of the United States doesn't have the power to do anything about the Health Care Act. Period. I don't care what they told you. The President of the United States does not have the power to write law, overturn law, or set aside law. That is a job and a privilege left entirely to the legislation. But, keeping that in mind, there is something that we are not being taught. Okay? It is my professional opinion that we do not need to repeal Obamacare. Obamacare is, I keep doing that, don't I? Health Care Act. The Health Care Act is unconstitutional, and therefore it is null and void. Our founders explicitly said, time and time again, you can check me out. Go to Federalist Papers 64, go to Federalist Papers 33. Alexander Hamilton said that when the government steps outside its boundaries of the Constitution, it is up to the people to redress the injury that's been done to it. John Jay said that when the government acts unconstitutionally, and he was speaking about, what are those things called? Agreements with foreign nations. Treaties, that's the word I'm looking for. Sorry, traveling too much, brain fried. He was speaking about treaties, but it's a principle that applies across the board. If something is unconstitutional, John Jay said, it is a null and void decision. And all that needs to happen is that you have to have your governors, like Rick Scott has stood up and said, we will not impose this. Your legislators get on board and say, we will not do this. And it doesn't happen. Now let me tell you something, because you're going to hear this. First off, you're going to hear, well, the Supreme Court said that the Health Care Act is constitutional. Then you're going to hear, well, the Supreme Court said state nullification is not proper, it's not constitutional. Those are both lies. Notice Alexander Hamilton said when the government steps outside. He didn't say the president or the legislature, he said when the government. And the Supreme Court is 1/3 of our government, with no less power, no more power. They are not the ultimate arbiters of what is constitutional because they are the government and they can be just as unconstitutional as the president and the legislation. We are the judges of what's constitutional because we are government of the people, by the people, and for the people, and our founders spoke clearly on this. There's not a single provision within that Health Care Act that is constitutional because the very premise of it is unconstitutional. Because the government, the federal government, has no business in your health care. The fact that they are in your health care is unconstitutional.
Question from the floor.
I asked Craig a question when I was sitting here about what happens to my 401k or retirement account if President Obama gets reelected. I'd like him to tell you guys.
Okay, so this is probably no one's going to get KrisAnne Hall yelling at everybody, but here's the deal. No, you don't yell. She educates. There's been a rumor going around that your 401k IRA is in jeopardy, correct? What we know is the government needs money. The problem with Social Security and Medicare is that there was a pot of money sitting there and the politicians stole it. They stole all the money. In case you don't know, this whole premise that Medicare is fine and we don't need to do anything and Ryan's plan is out of line is a lie. Even the Congressional Budget Office, even President Clinton said, by their own numbers, 2017, Medicare's done. They stole all the money. The government needs money, and they are having conversations about stealing all of our retirement accounts, our IRAs, our 401ks, our Roths, our SEPs. Why are they having that conversation? It's the only pot of money left. They stood on our House and Senate floor as recently as a year and a half ago and had conversations about stealing our retirement plans. It is not fiction, unfortunately, it's true, and it's been happening since the Clinton era at least.
Pastor Marty's got a question.
I hear you say that it's unconstitutional. I hear us say that we need to vote to repeal Obamacare. I hear you saying it's not going to be that easy to do. You tell me that's unconstitutional. Those are words. I want some actions that we can do as the people of America to be able to reverse and to turn it, to do whatever we have to do to get it turned around. What do we have to do?
Well, the first thing that we have to do is we need to put pressure on our governors and our legislators to make sure that they understand that they have the power to nullify and that we expect them to do that, okay? We've gotten down this road not just because we took a wrong turn 2 weeks ago, okay? We've been headed down this path for 100 years. 100 years of the government doing things that they're not supposed to do. In 1792, James Madison argued against federal government subsidies. Okay? We were already trying to subsidize our agriculture. This was cod fishermen. In 1792, we have to understand that government is always the enemy to liberty, and that's why the requirement is eternal vigilance. There's no room to be a couch potato when you're being eternally vigilant. What we do as citizens, and frankly, you don't know this, but I wrote a book. I have a book out there called Liberty First, The Path to Restoring America. 10 things that individual citizens can do to help restore America back to its founding principles and to the place that we need to be. But the thing is, if you don't know what you're going to do, or if you know what you're supposed to do and you don't do anything at all, then having that information is irrelevant. We've gotten this way because we haven't taught the truth for a long time. When I teach my seminar, it's a 5-hour seminar on the history of the Constitution and the Bill of Rights. I've taught 87-year-old men. I've taught men and women with PhDs in history. I've taught Supreme Court judges. Not here in Florida, they're not concerned about the Constitution here. But in Texas, I've taught Supreme Court judges. Every single one of them have come up to me and said, KrisAnne, you taught me history that I've never heard before in my life. I never knew that's what the Constitution was built on and that's what it meant. So we've got to start teaching each other about this. We've got to start teaching our children. The beginning of fixing the problem is understanding that you have one.
We have to know the truth. We've all forgotten basic truths in life. The federal government did not create the states. The states created the federal government. And when we created the federal government, we said you have the right to do X, Y, or Z. But we took it a step further, didn't we? We said if it's not X, Y, or Z, you specifically do not have the right to do it, and it's reserved for the states. But if we do not know the truth, we are easily deceived. When this law was passed, people went crazy and said, we'll sue, we'll sue. And I heard a funny conversation about 2 congressmen standing on the House floor. So the Republican congressman saying he's going to sue, the Democratic congressman saying, I don't understand, because it's unconstitutional. The Democratic congressman says, we passed it with a majority. He goes, but you can't do it, it's unconstitutional. But we had a majority in the House and the Senate. I don't even know what you're talking about. It It wasn't irreverence. He really had no idea. We passed it with a majority. What do you mean it's unconstitutional? And the guy says, you don't have the right to take over health care. It's unconstitutional. And the guy says, and I quote, everything we do up here is unconstitutional. When our government, when we got that rail bill, this is off subject, but we got the rail bill, and I'm talking to Sandy Adams about why she voted for the rail bill when she was getting ready to run for Congress in the federal government. And she says, the reason why I voted for the rail bill was because the federal government wanted the rail bill. We did not in Tallahassee. The federal government wanted it. They said if we didn't vote for the rail bill, they were going to call a $300 million loan, and I have $300 million to pay them back. And I said, I got an idea. How about you tell the federal government, you call the $300 million loan, we'll tell the citizens of Florida to mail their federal tax dollars to Tallahassee. You can send me a list bill for what you think is constitutional, and I'll pay it when I want to. Do not allow them to take our money and control us with it. This is our world. We control it if we stand up and we talk.
This is the book that I was telling about. Thanks, Tom brought these up. He wanted me to mention these. This is the Liberty First, not the Path to Restoring America. This is the other book that I've written. It's called Not a Living, Breathing Document, Reclaiming Our Constitution. This will teach you the 700 years and the 5 documents that I referenced today that built our Constitution. I also have 2 children's books, because if we don't start teaching our children the truth, they're being taught a lie. When it becomes time for them to run this country, they're going to think the enemy is our friend. You go to any college campus these days, you'll see Che Rivera t-shirts, people glorifying Mao, Zedong, and all these communist dictator rulers that are murderers, because we haven't taught our children the truth. So I have these 2 children's books as well. So thanks for letting me do that, Tom. Appreciate that.
Let me ask you a question to the audience. I haven't seen a person move toward the doors. I got a feeling you would like to continue this for a few more minutes. Is that true? Can we have time, Pastor? Let's take 2 more questions. There's a gentleman in... I'm being told that we're going to do 2 questions. This gentleman over here apparently was first.
I'm in the healthcare field. I'm a nuclear medicine technologist, and actually I lost my job about 2 years ago. And I'm having a tough time finding work. Well, my question is, the Constitution, you talk about the Constitution, whether it's constitutional or unconstitutional. But according to Obama and a lot of his crony friends, it's a living document. And they're getting away with it. And that's really scary. You talk about what they're teaching in schools, revisionist history, whatnot. And I'll tell you the truth, if I had my way, I think everyone should stop boycotting ABC, NBC, CBS, MSNBC, CNN.
Well, combating the lies is first knowing the truth. I travel, this is what I do. I travel around the country and I teach this history. Because it is the fundamental proof that the Constitution is not a living, breathing document. I teach people that don't believe that it's a living, breathing document, but somehow accept that as just someone's opinion on how to interpret the Constitution. You don't interpret contracts based on opinion. You interpret contracts based on law. And law requires that you go to the framers of the contract when you have any problems or discrepancies or vagaries about what they've written. The living, breathing document people want you to believe that our founding fathers were winging it, that they had no idea what they were doing. They do that to discredit what they've done, so that you can believe that they had no foundation, no experience, they were just winging it, and therefore it's quite possible and very likely, because we all know how politicians are, that they created a fundamentally flawed document. The problem is they weren't the politicians of the caliber that we have today. Okay? They were men who actually believed what they believed and said what they believed and lived up to promises. But not only that, they had a wisdom of their own history. And they had studied everything that they could know about history and about governments and everything that they knew about how governments interacted with people. And they debated and they debated and they debated. Do you know the most important thing and during the foundation of our nation was the single event of ratifying the Constitution and creating a United States? It took us from being 13 independent countries, little newly formed countries, that would have been easily picked off one by nations because we just spent everything that we had in the Revolution. So the most important thing that they did was create a United States of America to save the prospect of liberty and to save themselves. It took them over 5 years to do it. But we have the caliber of the politician today that will accept the lie that we have to pass the bill so we can read the bill. If it took them 5 years to create the most important document in the history of America and the formation of America, is there anything that this Congress does today that's more important than that needs to be done tomorrow?
And a question from the gentleman in the back there?
Yes, there are so many hidden taxes in this healthcare bill. Is it true that one of them is that they're going to be able to tax all my banking transactions and my credit card transactions?
Well, that was actually the bank bill that got passed, not the healthcare law. The healthcare law, there's truths, half-truths, myths and lies, like I like to call them. So it is true that banking transactions are going to be taxed, but that's not within the healthcare law, that's within the bank bill that got passed. The healthcare law, you hear about myths like the 3.8% tax that's owed on the sale of your home. That's actually true and lie. It depends on what you sell your home for. So you're allowed to have an exemption of $500,000. You don't owe capital gains on the sale of your home. If it's above $500,000, you do. Well, if it's above $500,000, you owe that tax. That also applies to IRAs, 401ks, Roth, SEPs, unearned income, business profit sharing. The taxes go on for a really long time, and we can have conversations, but not in the healthcare law. It's the other bill.
I think that brings up a really good point. They're doing things every day that are just slipping by. And our conservative Republican House has given more power to the president than he's stolen himself. So we've got to be a people more about principle than we are about party these days.
Show up. Show up in numbers.
It's the
Show
only thing
up on the
politicians
street.
know.
That's right. Show up on the street. Get behind the politicians. It's time to go to work like never before. Our founding fathers pledged everything. The reason why it's a John Hancock and not anything else is the Declaration of Independence is a list of grievances against a king. It's a death warrant. When they sign this, they're coming to get them. Can you imagine the room? We're all going to stand in here and sign grievances against our king, that he's been unjust and unruly, and he's abolished things, and he's done this, and he's done that. And everybody's sitting in the room going, we really going to do this? We really going to sign this? And John Hancock comes along, he signs that thing super huge, and says, I want that old bastard to be able to read it with his glasses on. How much courage does it give to the room? Where's the courage of the people? Where's the courage of the greatness of the past? It's here. It needs to be unleashed. It's you. There's more energy, knowledge, know-how, and power sitting in this room than most rooms we sit in. You guys have the connections to make the difference more than we do. You guys were the greatest generation. You guys lived in a world where the president said, we choose to go to the moon. We choose to go to the moon and do these other things not because they are easy, but because they are hard. Where is the American spirit? Where is the John Hancock? It sits out there and not up here.